Hey everyone, this is LYS from Laddering Your Success, and you're listening to the LYS Podcast.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome one and all to EduSteps, the online mentoring podcast powered by Laddering Your Success. I'm LYS, co-founder of Laddering Your Success, and I'm honored as always to be joined by my fellow co-founder and good friend Festus Samoye. How you doing today?
Doing really well. Today has already started off to be a pretty busy day, but I'm
glad to be working. That's it. One of Festus' favorite sayings. He has many, but it's not one thing, it's the other. So it's just good to have you on, man.
100%.
And we're also blessed to be joined once again by the future Doctor of Education, Jamark Crawford. Jamark, how you doing today, brother?
Hey, I'm just happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And we are happy, as always, to have you on, brother, man. Fighting a good fight, man. Thank you so much for all that you've done for us and all that you're doing, man. We know that success, great things ahead of your way. So over the past couple of weeks, we've talked about COVID. We've talked about social interaction with students. We've talked about DEI. We've talked about technology integration. There's a lot of things happening right now in the world, right? Some we know about, some we don't. But all of these things are going to affect us as people, right? Either as a taxpayer, as a parent, as a student, as an educator, or just someone who depends on services, right? Like healthcare, police, fire, other essential workers like lawyers, accountants, doctors, plumbers, electricians, things like that. So the future of these important jobs in these industries are closely tied to politics. Now, as much as we try to deny it, as much as we try to not to have these conversations, those things are connected. It's just the way it is, right? And we usually focus on how parents, teachers, and students shape our communities and schools. But as we've learned more, we see that these things go much deeper, right? We kind of think about surface level, but we got to think about how things like policy trickle down all the way down to us. So for this week, the last two things we're going to be discussing as far as things to look out for in 2025 and beyond, we're going to talk about project-based learning, and we're going to talk about predictive algorithms and biases, okay? So in regards to project-based learning is a student-centered approach to teaching students that really focuses in or tries to hone in on critical thinking skills, trying to get kids to be the primary thinker, so to speak, to be able to solve problems, right? And so my first question to everyone is, what are some of the benefits and what are some of the challenges of implementing project-based learning in diverse educational settings? Let me read that one more time because it's kind of loaded. What are the benefits? So what's the good? What are the challenges? What are some of the things that are going to be kind of hard to implement project-based learning in diverse educational settings? So I'll just leave that open for anyone.
To me, I think one of the biggest challenges is always going to be logistics, right? The cost of doing certain things. And so, it's one thing to do a more theoretical based project, paper, pen, pencil, you know what I mean? But when you start trying to say, hey, how do you actually start creating things, then it gets a little bit different. And so about a year or two ago, there was this initiative known as the Year of Return. Actually, it's 2019, but Liberia was doing theirs in 2020, and they were talking about bringing people out to observe these projects and stuff like that. And they were talking about doing like a spaghetti project. Like, hey, we're going to use some spaghetti to basically build some towers and stuff like that, And, teachers do these different things all the time, popsicle sticks, spaghetti, something that's an inexpensive resource to try to plan out these projects. And so I think that's the thing is that, based off your location where you're at as an educator, yes, get parents involved, say, hey, look, we want to do X, Y, Z. Can you guys help with these resources? But I think that logistics, the resource is going to be the biggest challenge.
I think with project-based learning, The benefit, I think, definitely would be the engagement and the cultural relevance, with having a diverse population, being able to include, especially in different projects, different people's culture, history, background, things of that nature. And that, I think, project-based learning definitely engages in the authentic engagement for the student. So you have that. You can also use project-based learning towards individualized learning, personal learning, different individual needs. That differentiation can definitely take place in that, as well as developing skills, not only academic skills, but developing other skills that would be needed to thrive in today's time, such as communication opportunities, communicating with people whom you might normally not communicate with, because in schools, public schools, and things of that nature, people have their own cliques and groups. So organize it to where you're talking to people whom you don't normally talk to. So being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and like I said, other than academic skills, just technology skills with these project-based learning, it include research. So knowing how to ethically retrieve information and citing those sources, things of that nature. It can also help for our people who are not English, where English is not their first language, English language learners. It creates the opportunity to participate in discourse with that. And if the project-based learning is definitely implemented in a way it's addressing real world current time issues, oh man, that right there is something else. It sparked that critical thinking and getting these different points of view. So really, 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 really beneficial to that point. So now when we talk about the challenges of project-based learning, I think one of the first challenges that come to my mind would be the teacher preparation. That would be the downside, unfortunately, but it would be beneficial for the students. But you wouldn't be able to walk in the classroom unprepared and be like, hey, we finna do this project. Nah, you can't wing it. You gotta be prepared. You gotta plan. Also, a challenge may be the timing, right? So when I'm planning for something like this, it does not follow the norm of how do I want to say this, the times, to where this time is here, you got this time to teach this subject. Because in project-based learning, because it's student-centered, you don't know how long it's going to take for those students to have those aha moments. You're there to, but if it's truly student-centered, they're creating that knowledge. That's the constructivist approach, where we're not just telling them, they're literally creating that knowledge based on their experience with their project, and authentic engagement with each other. So the timing constraints may be a challenge with that as well. The assessment piece of it, because not only are you just assessing the final product, it's like, how do you assess that these particular students have learned what I needed them to learn from the project? So you would have to, it's just more time consuming. And again, these are things that are understood. You would have to have a plan in mind. Okay, I want them to come to this. I need them to learn this. I need them to learn this. Okay. And throughout their project, I am actually actively monitoring, right? I'm not just giving them a project where I can just sit and chill for the day. I have to actually have these goals that I need them to come to, and make sure throughout the course of their project that, okay, oh, they're having this conversation. And let's say I notice that this group ain't quite here to meet this particular topic I need to get to. Let me start. Hey, did y'all think about this and this? What do you think about that? What do y'all notice? And now they have something to look up. So you kind of facilitated that, right? So it could be challenging with the assessment part. Another challenge could be when you're working with students who may have special needs, just making sure that they're able to take away what they need to learn as well, without watering the content down to where they can have that space. Hey, I need them to be able to look here. So it could be challenging if they don't have that in-class support, and opportunities with that. And I think, and it will be out of the norm, what public school might say fit curriculum, like I said, with a strict scheduled time. So those are the things that I can think of right now.
Did you see how he just roasted that answer? It's like, golly, you know what I'm saying?
Hey, LYS fam. It's Ole. Thanks so much for listening to LYS. I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk to the parents. That's right, mom and dad. Parents, prepare your child for their best educational fit after high school with our comprehensive LYS Parents Guidebook. Our helpful guide includes a range of activities designed to help you better understand your child's unique gifts and abilities. Additionally, we provide valuable insights into the student loan debt crisis and offer practical tips on how to avoid accumulating large amounts of debt. Our ebook also includes a wealth of information on scholarships, grants, and payment exemptions that can help guide your child towards a bright and successful future. With our expert guidance, you can rest assured that your child is well prepared to make informed decisions about their education and career path. Don't let your child's future be in jeopardy. Invest in their future today by downloading the LYS Parents Guidebook. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to the show because you know it's some good topics.
Like James Harden cooking. Like James Harden cooking. No, I totally agree. Love those answers. I think the one thing that I thought about primarily because of diverse learners, the only other challenge I could think of would be making sure it's equitable across the board. So students, in nicer areas are getting the same, or children and students in areas that don't have it as good are getting the same type or an equitable type of education somewhere where, it comes rather easy, where there's a higher SES, I'll say. So, but I love it. Wonderful answers.
And I think even on that point that you just made, a big determining factor is because there are laws in place that ensures an equitable education, but when we're thinking about the laws and the policies that are in place, they're talking about funding, right? Making sure, okay, these low SES, they have enough money to afford the same tools necessary that these other places have. The problem where I see where that's outside of policy control is the caliber of highly educated professionals to do that, right? So when we look at high SES areas compared to low SES areas, I'm just going to be honest, the teachers that are highly qualified, unless they have a passion for, I want to make a difference, I want to give back, if I'm a person of color, whatever, and this is where I come from and I just want to serve my community, you do have teachers that are like that. But then rightfully so, not judging anybody, you have teachers that just make decisions for themselves. You know what? I know what comes with working in this area. It comes with a lot of stress, whatever, and I don't want to do that. I choose to go over here. And so they're taking their talents of how to implement something like a project-based learning with these kids. Whereas, over here we have people, hey, I just want to do the bare minimum, do what I told to get my check, and not judging, but it is unfortunate that it's out of like people control to where, hey, where do I want to go apply for a job?
And I think you're bringing up a big point in terms of, and I don't want it to get too off topic, but I think that's a difficult choice that some educators have to make, is that coming out of low SES environments for themselves, picking up student loan debt, having the hard time of them making it through themselves. And now it's like, now that I have this quality education, but I got this debt, I got to look back at my own community before I can look forward to like, hey, I'm going to get out of here and go to where they're paying more, or where there's more opportunity, or where things are better. I think that's a hard challenge for some educators to face, and I think when it comes to, trying to just tie this back into the topic at hand, it's like, okay, how do you time, schedule, arrange your life in such a way that you can give back to a community, but then also go and have your success as well? Because it's sad, because, you got programs, Teach for America, different types of things like that, where it's like, okay, certain people who are more privileged are coming into a community and they're giving a little bit more exposure. They had a little bit more stable life, but then it's like, okay, how long, do they put up with, you know what I mean? The lowest, yeah. And so it's a difficult choice and topic.
Yeah, I definitely rock with what you're saying. It is difficult, and you guys had an in-person event one time, and I forgot the speaker. His name escaped me, because what you're talking about is something that I've just struggled with, just being transparent. And again, not to get away from the topic, but it's a struggle because I am a person who is really, really passionate about teaching. Like I love what I do, but trying to create change in that area, it's very difficult because I'm one that care about the students. And not saying that the other people that work there don't care about the students literally. It's just that, hey, they go along to get along with policies, and I'm just challenging the status quo and things of that nature. And so it's real difficult and it's stressful for me. So I'm like, man, it's easy for me to take my talents somewhere else over here to these people where I'm open, and they're just like, oh yeah, you want to do that, go for it. Oh, we're open to these differences. Oh yeah, like, because I came from that. I started in a district like that where I didn't have those issues. Then I went to this district. I'm like, wait, these people were so open to my ideas. Like, yeah, try it. I come over here, they're like, nah, do it like this, like this, like this. And the craziest thing, y'all scores are not improving, they're getting worse. So I'm like, and it's so easy for me to be like, shoot, it's less stress over there. Let me go on and go. But anyway, going back to the speaker that y'all talked to, when I talked to him about this, he gave me a different perspective. He was actually encouraging me. He said, yo, it's nothing wrong for leaving and doing what you need to do that's best for yourself. But this is how you do. You leverage the connections that you make when you leave to do better for yourself so that you can put yourself in a position to come back at a different level of capacity to provide what was missing. So if you're trying to make a change as a teacher and they're not listening, okay, cool. Go leave your community so that you can grow in your field. And then you're going to make those connections and get the resources that you need elsewhere. And then once you develop whatever it is that you want to develop at a different capacity as a consultant or of such sorts, you now can come back. And this is the data. This is proven that what I'm talking about works, and blah, 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 blah. And now serve your community that way. But he was saying basically, don't hold yourself hostage because you don't want to leave your people to better yourself. Go leave, better yourself, and bring that knowledge back at a different level. So that was very interesting that he told me that.
Yeah, Olay said it was a Donnell Cooper. Shout out to Donnell Cooper, Black Men's Wellness, African American Men's Wellness Agency. Shout out to them. But no, I think that's a huge point. Is when we talk about improving students' education, is like the only way you're going to improve education is by improving the teacher. And that's scripture. What I'm saying? A student is not above his teacher. And so the thing is, as educators, I think it's important to go out, get the education you need, go out, make sure you're stable, so that you could bring back the best for the community. So yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep. You're.
I'm not sure what happened. It said video, internet being interrupted. So I just refreshed because I was like, while you were talking, I was like, let me get out of here. I don't want nothing to mess me up. Everybody here? We good?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. We can just start like normal.
Yeah. Just keep going.
Okay. So yeah, great points there. So it kind of went all over. You guys kind of hit on a lot of really great points. To your point earlier, Crawford, about that are talented going to certain areas, that's such a beautiful point, because one of my thoughts was, okay, you get highly qualified teachers, they're human, they're going to make a human reaction, a human decision. We think of them kids is good over here. They're well behaved. They got 2-parent homes. They have all the variables that I need to be successful and work with them. I'm going to go there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then you say, all right, well, I guess I'm going to stay here. There are just certain variables that make it tougher to work in those districts, to work with those schools, to work with those students, to work with those parents, right? And so one of my thoughts was, well, why don't you just give them a little stipend? If you give a teacher that comes here a stipend, maybe they'll want to stay and maybe they'll want to work. But then I thought, and I said, how much extra funds are you now going to have to put in to try and support this? And at some point, those teachers, they're not going to stay. They're basically staying for the extra funds. And so this goes back to a theme that we have been going over for the last 2 years since we started, which is a lot of these things have to be dealt with at the home. A lot of these things have to be dealt with at the home because of there are certain variables, certain things that are happening in one place that aren't happening in another place, but you're starting to see success. I told Festus this last night. I was like, we have a lot of tough conversations that we need to really have in order to move forward. And so that's one thing. Second thing y'all talked about, you talked about Teach for America. That really got me hot because I'm not going to say I'm not a fan of Teach for America, but the whole idea of, I went and got my degree from Harvard. Now I'm going to come to the hood and come show them. Actually, Teach for America is going to teach me how to come talk to them, and I'm going to go teach there for a couple of years, and then they're going to start putting me on the ladder to become a director of curriculum for this or for that. That whole thing kind of rubs me the wrong way, but either way, I love those responses. Did anyone have anything they wanted to drop in before we went to the next question, next point? So next thing, we're going to jump into predictive algorithms and bias. Okay, so this is something that's really, really huge. I remember a couple of years ago during COVID, I know we remember those forehead thermometers where you kind of stand in front of an iPad and it could actually read your temperature. One of the issues that they were having is that it was not able to read the foreheads of people of color, right? So, Black people, other diverse ethnic background, folks of ethnic backgrounds would come in and put their forehead there and it wouldn't be able to read it. And what it was saying was it was using a certain technology that would take, shades, I guess, skin color or what have you, to read that. And there weren't a lot of Black or faces to recognize of ethnic backgrounds. And so it started me thinking, I'm like, well, that's happening for this, and COVID was a worldwide, pandemic. What other aspects or what other areas are these going to be affecting? When you think about the fact that predictive algorithms and AI can do things like predict school retention, those that are more than likely to drop out, right? We can figure that out even sooner, which when I read about that, I thought it was funny because we can already figure out who's going to go to prison based off a third grade test score. Just imagine what they know now based off of predictive technology and AI.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. Just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that even though the cost of college can be daunting, the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook can assist you in realizing your dreams. You can identify and apply for scholarships using the information, advice, and resources in our comprehensive guide. Also, we've provided a template for a successful scholarship essay to help you stand out from the crowd. Don't allow student loan debt to control you. Get your copy of the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook right away to take charge of your destiny. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to that fire conversation.
Right? So I say all that to ask this first question. How can educational institutions ensure that predictive algorithms are free from racial biases?
I don't think that anything could be totally free, but I do think, it comes down to a number of different layers. Number one, who's in the room? And that is so key because when you're creating these algorithms, if there's not representation in that room, when the algorithm's being created, then it's obviously going to be skewed. And that's one of the things I think we need to really work on as a community, whether low SES, whether minority community is, are we prompting students? Are we encouraging students to get into these fields, right? So that they can be in the room. We can always talk about, this, that, and the third. But if students aren't doing the work to get into those rooms, then we're going to have a problem. And I was having two things happen recently that really stuck out to me. One, there was a woman who, I forgot what school she graduated from, but she just got her PhD, and they were like, oh, she's the first Black woman PhD in this subject, period. Like ever in this subject, she's the first Black woman PhD. And I was like, wow. And then I was talking with a past friend, and he was like, there's not a Black PhD in theology that's living in the country. I'm like, in the country that's living? He's like, no, none. And so when you look and you say, well, how many people are getting doctorates in this subject or that subject or this subject versus getting doctorates in subjects that aren't quite as familiar, right? And there's different barriers there, right? There's, the encouragement factor, right? It's so much easier to interact with those things that are more familiar to you or to the community, right? The proximity principle. But then it's that's one layer is getting the family, the friends, the community to support. Hey, yeah, you're gonna be the first to do this, and we're gonna help support you to be the first to do that. Next, it is with those algorithms themselves. What exactly are we predicting, and what are we using the algorithms for? It's good if we could use the algorithms for obviously early intervention, right? So, hey, based off of the trajectory of where this is going, for example, you could put together a number of different factors and say, well, how many officer referrals typically does somebody have who goes to jail? Or how many, suspensions does somebody have before, the amount of learning loss, they're not able to graduate? There's those different types of things. Okay, again, reading level, again, so now you could start using predictive analytics, and you could say, oh, wait a second, these things are coming, let's do early intervention. But I think when we look at predictive analytics and then we turn around and we use those things, again, they base building prisons off of third grade reading scores. So once we're already saying that's the type of investment we're going to make, right, then that also says something else about what other investments we're not going to make. We're not going to invest in, extra reading specialists, right? So if you think about that and you say, well, how much does it cost to build a prison versus extra reading specialists, to do extra pullouts or something like that, or to, now they got online tutoring available. Our son does online tutoring to say, hey, look, we're going to pay for that subscription or for that tutor. Are you going to get them to go? Maybe you have to sign some kind of clause. You're going to get them to go, and those different types of things. So to me, those are ways in which, predictive analytics can be used for good, but also can be used in a way that's harmful. And we need to, as people, we need to make decisions to know the difference. And this is, and I think you brought the point up earlier, it comes back to caring. It comes back to parents, right? It comes back to community. What are the conversations that you're having with your child? How often do you speak life into them about their future, about their hopes, about their aspirations? How often do you even listen to those things? Not just say, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? That's one thing. But how often do you say, hey, what are you into? What do you like? Okay, we're planning a family field trip to this place, and I get it. That takes money, that takes time, that takes resources. But at the same time, is there other ways of getting it done? Through your mosque, through your church group, through your community program? Are there field trips that are being held? Oftentimes there's days, for example, the museums are totally free, and so maybe it's, hey, we're gonna see if somebody could help us with an Uber or a Lyft or a bus pass when the museum's free, so we could get down there and have these experiences, right? So there's a number of different ways, but you have to be proactive and to be able to get those things done. So I'll end with that.
Can you reframe the question for me, Ole?
How can educational institutions ensure that predictive algorithms are free from racial bias? So what are things that educational institutions, what are some things that educational institutions can do to ensure that those predictive algorithms are free from racial biases?
Yeah, I got you. I just needed that question real quick because Festus was saying some good stuff, and I wanted to make sure I stayed on topic. And when I was listening to Festus share, what was coming in my mind from the educational part of the predictive analytics and things of that nature, what I would think about is what problem are they trying to solve? So I would think of the essential purpose of what did you say? Say it again. What is it called? Predictive analytics. Is that what it's called? Predictive algorithms. I would say the whole essential purpose for that is to solve a problem, right? And so in the educational field, if we're using these predictive algorithms, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And I saw that when Festus mentioned how they use the third grade scores to determine, how many prisons to build or how much room they're going to need, I think about that. Well, that's not really solving the problem. That's them trying to make money because, we know prisons, that's a for-profit type of thing. But when we're looking for the educational use and the benefit of our students and to avoid racial bias, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? Number one, are we trying to solve a problem, or like, what is it? Are we trying to assess? Because we know that assessments could be biased, right? So what is the purpose? Is the purpose to actually assess the intellect of these students so we can see that they have the academic ability to enter this school or whatnot? Is our purpose to have a test so that we can limit the amount of certain particular backgrounds or cultures that can get into these types of schools? So for me, it comes down to the purpose and intention. And with that purpose and intention, if we want to help, then when Festa said have people in the room, well, if I'm going to create this algorithm, I need it to be able to identify all these different people of cultures in this background. So I want to get as diverse as humanly possible with people who have done the work, like Festa said, to be in that room, right? And so that's what I would think of, just essentially, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Are we trying to solve a problem? Like, what is the purpose behind that? And I think we can move from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. Love it. Love it. I love the idea of breaking it down, reverse engineering it almost to what is a problem what is the issue we're trying to solve. One of the things that I thought of is, in spite of all the benefits that things like AI and predictive algorithms do, we are still people and there still needs to be a human touch. Think, doing, to your point, Crawford, within that code, within that algorithm, being able to speak to some of the biases that may be there within that code is essential. One of the things that I read about was that sometimes these predictive algorithms overestimate the academic success of white and Asian students, and it underestimates the success of Black and Hispanic students. And so I think, since we know that as humans, that has to be thought of as you're creating this algorithm, right? Hey, you're going to automatically assume certain things. Don't assume those things. I think. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I was actually listening to I guess you could say, a training on this. Shout out to EYL and those guys over there. And the guest they had was explaining how these algorithms are made. A lot of people misunderstand algorithms and how they're made. The algorithm is a mathematical equation that is then fed large amounts of data. And so the algorithm, the equation itself, is not necessarily as biased as much as the data that's being fed into it, right? So for example, back to the illustration about the cameras during the COVID period, it's the skin pigmentation, right? That's the data, is the different types of skin pigmentation. And then you have lighting, right? And then you have the various kinds of lighting. And then you have lighting against the pigmentation. And so that then determines part of the factor. Now you also have body heat, okay? So then you have, how does certain skin colors, certain pigmentations attract light? And then how does that register as body heat, right? So there's these three different factors of data that go into this, right? And so the thing is, if the data is biased, right, then you're going to get a biased outcome. And so the thing is, this is where, again, math really oftentimes is it should be a great equalizer, right? Because math is simply math. 1 + 1 is 2. Doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your background, none of that stuff matters. And so what ends up happening is we feed we feed biased data into systems, right? Trying to solve a people problem. And unfortunately, people are far more dynamic than we think, or than we can perceive. And so sometimes, let me put it this way. Sometimes the solution to the kid is a hug. You know what I'm saying? It's not an algorithm. And I think those are the things that when we throw this science out there as this is going to solve, where we could miss the mark. So I just want to throw that out there.
Beautiful point. Absolutely. I think that right there is that's some good sauce there. I think to that point, one of the things that I thought about was having groups of people, because the question was what can educational institutions do? So I think if you have a group of people, a diverse group of people who are able to look at this information and dissect it and kind of extract and extrapolate some things on top of what those predictive algorithms are doing, I think that's a great way to be able to ensure that there's fairness and equity across the board. And I think if you also, to Crawford's point, emphasize creating those highly qualified educators to be able to know how to operate within these things, because essentially, even to the point where I stopped teaching, that was still something that we did. Whenever the students would have an assessment, they would put data there in front of us. And we had to, and one of the things there was demographics. One of the things there was, they had all these different variables to look at. So even until, I'll say 3-4 years ago, it's definitely something that's being used. And I'm being probably, a little conservative, it's probably a little bit further. So I love that. Just wonderful answers there. This is really good conversation. And lastly, the last question I have for everyone is, and I think we've already kind of hit on it. I have a question, but I think one of these other questions may be a little bit better. We'll see. I'll jump into my question, then we'll see where the conversation goes. But what are the ethical considerations when using data-driven decision-making in education? What are the ethical considerations when using data-driven decision-making in education? And the reason why I said we kind of already hit on that was because we already mentioned, the prison scores and things like that. And so before we answer, I wanted to bring up this point that I had thought about when I selected this question. And that is this. When we started these last couple of episodes, we've talked about politics and how everything is a lot of these things are systems, right? Laws are made, written into existence. School districts have to oblige and follow those things. Principals are told what to tell the teachers and specialists and staff, and then they bring those things down to students. Students go home and tell their parents, parents complain, right? So it's just a cycle that continues to happen. So you get to see the trickle-down effect of these things. Historically, the fact that we know that things like test scores can be used to determine things like prison populations and whether or not a prison should be built automatically tells us, or tells me at least, that someone who's making the prison is working with someone who's making a particular law. You see where I'm going with this? To ensure that as long as these things are happening, I can get my prison built. Because whether we like it or not, we do live in a capitalist system. And I know Festus got some bag of dimes to drop on that, march of dimes to drop on that, but we do live within that system. So when we talk about ethical responsibility, what are some of those things? And I'll add this point too, what are some of the things that we can do almost to watchdog some of those things that are happening? Because here's the thing, as technology grows, these things become exponentially greater and their reach goes so much further. And it's also, things happen so much quicker. Does that make sense, guys?
No, 100%. I think, again, they say if you don't want to get diabetes, eat as if you already have the disease, right? Meaning, in order to prevent something from happening, you have to put certain protocols in place. And one of the issues with that, one of the challenges with that is when you do that, you don't know the benefit of not having that outcome, right? So the person who exercises all the time, who eats right all the time, they're just not going to know what diabetes is about. They just don't know nothing about that life, right? Versus the person who has it and has to recover. I think the same thing applies to education to a certain degree, right? When you put best practices out there, quality educators, having high standards for students, right? Saying, oh no, you are going to learn to read. All this nonsense about like, no, I can't read. No, you're going to learn to read. And that way the student says, man, such and such said, this is the standard. Everybody reading before they leave my class. When you, again, the number of books available, computers, access to internet, those different types of things. When you level that playing field out, you really sometimes don't know the benefit of that because things are going well. And usually, just like the human psyche, really is not alert until things go wrong. You know what I mean? And when things are not right, that's when we look at things. And so, to me, that's where I think the biggest challenge is. That's the biggest challenge for parents. That's the biggest challenges for educators and administrators, is to give kids the resources they need to be successful, and then don't be so surprised when they're successful, and then don't start taking away the resources when they're successful. I was recently watching looked like a town hall meeting of the current HISD superintendent, and they were questioning him because of these NES schools. And when NES schools started, everyone said, oh, these are bad ideas. These NES schools, they're bad ideas. And, basically there was higher pay for certain teachers who went to NES schools. There was more resources into these schools. Well, some of those schools were not well-performing schools. Well, now those schools are performing well, and people are asking them to take away those things. And it's like, okay, what, at some point, some people are going to argue for argument's sake. You know what I mean? They're going to argue for argument's sake. And that I think is pitiful, to be honest with you. It's pitiful because at the end of the day, especially when it comes to somebody else's lives, to me, this is one of the reasons I try not to be pushy in my suggestions to people of what to go to school for, where to go to school, all of those different types of things, because I don't have to live with those decisions, right? They have to live with those decisions. And so when we tell everybody, as on a call this morning, and they were like, okay, these doctors, when they go for their specialties in school, a lot of times they're saying, man, go be a this specialty because they pay more. Not because you're better at it, not because you could better serve patients, but being a cardiologist, a thoracic surgeon pays more, so go do that. And then they end up hating it, and they end up, how does that affect people's lives? Instead of saying, man, you're really good at X, Y, or Z as a physician, just go do that and be good at that because it's going to have a better outcome for everybody else. I think the same thing happens in education is, hey, listen, such and such is teaching. They're doing a great job teaching. Instead of just saying, man, why don't we have other teachers come and observe them teaching and that's it? No, let's make them a specialist and let's get them out of the classroom, and then they could teach such and such and such. But they're doing a great job teaching. So now you take them away from the students, you know what I'm saying? Instead of just saying, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to create a rotation where you could go observe such and such instead of pulling them out of the classroom. So just general thoughts, man.
I need to rephrase that question.
No worries. I got you, buddy. All right. So what are the things when we are using that data-driven technology, when we're using predictive algorithms, when we're using AI, we're using all these different new and technology-based tools and resources to make decisions? What are some of the things we have to think about ethically? What are some of the things we have to think about ethically in 2025 and beyond, right? And so I use the prison example, right? And this is something that
I got you. All right. So again, like Festus was definitely dropping bombs, and the reason I always ask to rephrase that because I want to try to take what he's saying and make that connection to the educational part. And so with that, one of the important things is when we're looking at data and we're making data driven decisions, we have to be able to understand what it is that we're looking at and why it's happening the way it's happening, right? And so there's so many different sides to this, where Festus did mention that this is working over here and we're taking away the resources. Well, the conundrum with that is there's a lack of understanding of why said structure worked, right? So we're not looking at the data. So we can see that something is working, but are we actually understanding why it's working? That's why it's different tiers of the data to really see what is going on.
Hey, LYS fam. It's Ole once again. These days, many families are busy but want personalized attention. We at Laddering Your Success understand this dilemma and have created a unique approach to help guide you and your child with personal development tools to build a life of purpose. This intimate approach is helpful for those parents that feel the need to have a focused heart-to-heart conversation deciding on the next steps after high school. We provide individual post-secondary planning, virtual customized college and career counseling, and scholarship guidance and planning. Our one-on-one sessions are tailored to each individual student to maximize their potential in the post-secondary realm. With our guidance, your child will be able to make their dreams a reality. Don't wait. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to business on this podcast.
First off, what is the goal? What is the problem we're trying to fix? What do we want to achieve? Okay, so it's what do we want to achieve? How do we judge that we have achieved it? Then once we achieved it, where are we going to go from there? And if we have not achieved that goal, what structures do we have in place to remedy that? These are all the things that go into it when we are looking at data and assessing the data. We just don't go look at the data and just come up with stuff off the top of our head. We actually have to segregate this data and analyze, then synthesize this stuff so we can really know what's going on. And then the other thing is, okay, if this is working over here, the problem is if we have these policies, this is where the politics comes into play. These are the policies that we have. How can we change this to where it meets these policies? Well, then you just altered what caused this particular structure to work. You're now altering it, and now it's not working because you're altering it to fit certain policies because someone said that it should be delivered or done in this type of manner. So now we see we have something that is working, but what we want to do is take away the essential functions that are possibly contributing to the success of that structure, right? And so that's where we're unknowingly taking away these resources that are working, right? And so I feel like that's a big issue there. When we look at the students in need and when we look at the data, we low SES where these students are performing compared to our white counterparts and Asians and X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, let's put these policies in place to make sure that these people have the necessary funding. Okay, the schools have the necessary funding. Well, how are they spending that funding? They're spending that funding buying technology, laptops, all of that. Okay, that's cool. All right, cool. So we have the resources, so it's not a lack of resources, but now it's the policy of how we implement these resources and use it to the best of our ability to get the best possible results. And so sometimes that means let's look at these policies. Let's look at the data of the policy, right? This is how we actually use the data. How long has this policy been in place? And within this policy, have we seen an improvement on our student data in said categories that are for concern, or have they stayed the same, or have they gotten worse? Okay, if they have gotten worse and we had these policies in place, let's look at our policies. And I'm just making this up from the academic side. Let's look at our policies. Okay, I see that out of 9 months of school that the teachers are required to teach all of the content within 6 of those months, which technically they're supposed to have 9 months, but we're going to have our teachers teach everything in 6 months, and then on that 7 month, have them review everything they were supposed to learn in that 6 months, where that's just rush, rush, rush. And then on that 8 month, they take the test, and then 9 month, the students just are being babysat, right? That structure is not working. So then we need people who look at the data. You know what? Hey, just how I pointed the structure. Maybe the structure ain't working. Okay, what is out of our control? What is out of our control is when the state says we have to take this test. Okay, that's out of our control. Now let's work what's in our control. What's in our control is the way we structure instruction to where the kids that really need this information and to be able to go in depth so that they can understand can get it. And this is where this is where Festus said best practices, right? And I'm gonna add something to that, not just base practices, because it has to be based on something. It has to be research-based practices, things that have happened in the past, and based on the research and the study, it has been proven to have some kind of causation there, right? And that's what we want to look at. And research based practices is in-depth instruction over breadth, right? Breadth is covering so many different topics at a certain time. So I covered so many topics, but I didn't go into depth on this topic. So with that saying, I only have surface knowledge. But if I go in depth, I understand. So it doesn't matter how they ask me this question, because I went in depth, I actually get it. So they can ask me this same question in 5 different ways, which generally what happens on the test. You're asking the same question in so many different ways. But if I know a whole lot of stuff, surface level, I'm definitely going to bomb, right? And that's what's happening. So that's where we look at the structure and the policies, and let's see, okay, if I had this policy in place this time, and let's listen, let's look at the data, let's truly analyze this. Okay, it's not working. Let's work within our control. We can't control when they take a test, but let's try to manipulate this, and through trial and error, based on these goals. Our goal is this. How do we gonna know if we reach that goal? What are we gonna do if we reach the goal? What are we gonna do if we don't reach the goal? That is the essential focus to drive our decision making that are based on the data while we are actually analyzing and synthesizing that data. I'm sorry I'm talking fast. I'm looking at time. We got 2 minutes left, so I want to get all that in. So I stop there.
No worries, bro.
I hope that kind of made sense.
No, it absolutely did. It absolutely did. Did you have anything you wanted to say before I drop some final thoughts?
No, I think this is a great subject, and it's a great topic. So, yeah.
So I'm going to wrap up. I took some notes as both of you were talking, and I love what you said, Festus. And so the note I put on what you said, Festus, to the diabetes analogy, the best way to not be deficient academically is to treat your students as if they are academically sufficient. So creating that environment, creating that environment for students. And when you said that, man, when I wrote that down, it just reminded me to my first couple of years of teaching when I had all that energy, and I was low-key gung-ho. It reminded me of, so that was really good. Oh man, yeah, man, it's the plight, man. It's all good. And then Crawford, I love what you said. My note was, know what you're looking at and why it's happening. That's what I got from what you're saying. Make sure you know and understand the data, all the resources, and why are these things happening. And then what you said about analyzing these resources and their effectiveness. So really, and I love how you broke down that, how to analyze those resources, these patterns, the curriculum, instruction, all these things, and you broke it down. You talked about the 9-month period. What we normally do is we have a 6-month period of teaching. Well, on the 7th month, we'll start wrapping over and going over everything that we just went over 6 months. And in my research, I remember reading a lot about retention rates and things like that. And I was like, I just went back and, I talked about having all the energy my first couple of years. My last couple of years, I didn't have as much energy because, at a certain point, it was like, all right, now we got to wrap back around all this other stuff. And then I remember to what Crawford did. Crawford, to my final point, was one of the Mavericks who said, there's no way we can teach kids for 6 months and then go back and say, hey, in April, and say, hey, guys, remember that stuff we did in August? We're going to go over that again. They were like, there's no way the kids are going to do that. The kids are not going to be able to remember that. So Why, right? And that was what Crawford talked about, just breaking that process down. Why are they not able to remember? Why are they not able to retain? How deep are they going? I love that point about we're doing a lot of surface level teaching. And the whole point of this, the PBL that we mentioned before, all these great things happening in technology is for us to go deeper, to really have students almost become like little subject matter experts in a particular field as they go around in their day. And so I really, really, really enjoyed that. And to that point, as I said earlier, we do have to definitely rethink the way we're doing things, because we're not in the John D. Rockefeller model of education. We're in a post-industrialized era right now, right? Where we're not taking kids off the factory line to go put them in a factory, right? We do live in a world where you can be 15, 16 years old and you can make a good living online, right? Not talking about OnlyFans. Don't even think about it. I'm talking about YouTube streaming. Okay. I'm talking about YouTube streaming. I'm talking about starting a business. We've met kids in high schools that have businesses, right? All these different things. So definitely have to think about that. I'm not, and the last thing I put was trickle down economics. So I'm not thinking about like Ronald Reagan, because I can't think about exactly what trickle down economics is right now. I have to go back and read up on it. Trickle down in the sense of, as policymakers come up with policy, as we come up with laws and things, how do those things go from signed into law to down to your child's mind, to the parents' interaction with the child and with the school district, all those other things. Those are things we have to think about. So as Festus said, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation. What a great way to wrap up just our thoughts on what is going to happen to education in 2025 and beyond. Super, super, super awesome. I'm sure people are having conversations like this, but it's just great when we're able to have conversations like this. So I want to thank the future doctor of curriculum and instruction. Am I correct? Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Jamar Crawford, thank you so much. It's so awesome to hear you say those wonderful things, to hear you extrapolate and to break down so many of these things that we discuss and how they impact students finding their purpose. Much salute to you, sir. Thank you. We love you, brother. Please be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this. My YouTube people, thank you so much for your love and support. Got some Facebook people. Thank you. Appreciate your love and support. The Festus was going over some numbers with me. I said, who got them numbers? I said, I said, man, you ain't nothing but a slice, Jack. You know what I mean? No, I'm on.
Bro, chill out with the 80s or 70s.
You ain't nothing but a slice of Monterey Jack. No, but just thankful for everyone for your constant support. Even if you listen I always like to say this, even if you listen for 10 seconds, I love it. Listen a little bit longer next time. Try to listen for at least a minute. We may drop some fire for you, but stay with us. Keep liking, keep subscribing, keep sharing with your friends, with your teachers, folks in educational administration that work at the district, parents, students who are looking for advice, looking for help. We have a wealth of resources. We're just getting started. So thank you for staying with us on this ride, on this journey. My name is Ole Sharonki. This is the future Dr. Jamar Crawford. That's Festus Amoye, the founder of Laddering Your Success. Festus, go ahead and hit him with the phrase that pays, my good sir.
And there are legitimate excuses for not going to college. There's no legitimate excuse for not getting an education. We are going to see you on the next episode. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button right now. All right, y'all. Be blessed.
Oh, you still there? Well, thank you so much for listening to the LYS Podcast.